So I'm here with Richard Feynman. We're actually in the middle of the 20th century right now. Richard Feynman is a nuclear physicist who's worked at multiple universities across America, including MIT, Princeton, Caltech, and Cornell. So, Richard Feynman, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey there, I'm Richard Feynman. Disclaimer, I'm not just a nuclear physicist, I'm actually a quantum physicist. Yeah. What the are you doing?
So, I've heard a little bit about your Feynman diagrams. Could you elaborate on what those diagrams consist of?
So what we got here is a Feynman diagram. Now, Feynman diagrams are a visual representation of the interactions between subatomic particles. Now, see in this one, for instance, we got an electron and a positron. And as time progresses this way, you see them interacting. And what you get is a photon and a quark and an antiquark. And then from the antiquark, you get a gluon coming off of it. So that's how these work. You see these sort of like over time interactions between these subatomic particles.
Now, this looks pretty good, Feynman, but I have a question. When the arrows go this way, it seems like the positron is moving backwards in time if time goes this way. Can you explain that a little bit?
So when I was making my Feynman diagrams, I decided to follow Ernst Stuckelberg's idea that positrons can pretty much be represented as electrons moving backwards in time. So this positron is actually moving forward in time, but it's represented with an arrow pointing this way because it's the opposite of an electron.
You know how Newton discovered gravity? When the apple fell from the tree? Well, you can have a taste of Newton yourself with this Fig Newton bar. Fig bars available at the George Mason vending machine. Taste the gravity. So, Feynman, although high school students mainly discuss Feynman diagrams, what other sorts of diagrams did you develop during your time as a physicist?
Well, what you see here is what I like to call the Parton model. And the Parton model is a visual representation of what happens when high energy hadrons collide. Now, you'll notice that these two hadrons have different numbers of dots. See, this one has more. Now, this means that this one has a higher energy, and that affects the angle that occurs when they collide.
So, Feynman, rumor has it that you were the youngest group leader in the theoretical division of the Manhattan Project. Could you speak a little bit about your involvement in that project?
Yeah, so I was in charge of coming up with a formula that would predict the energy yields of a nuclear detonation.
And how did that make you feel?
Well, when I first saw a nuke blow up, my first response was euphoria, but later on, I gotta say, it caused me a lot of anxiety to think, what me and my fellow physicists had unleashed upon the world.
Physics is like sex. It may have some practical results, but that's not why we do it.
So, Richard, tell me about your love life.
Well, you see, when I was accepted to Princeton University for my graduate studies, a stipulation of my acceptance was that I was not allowed to be married while I was learning and working there. And unfortunately, this meant that I could not marry my high school sweetheart, Aline. But I always said that once I got my PhD, she and I were gonna get hitched. But unfortunately, soon after that, she was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And by the time I finally graduated and was able to make her mine, she was so ill that at the ceremony I could only kiss her on the cheek. And right after we were married, I took her directly to the hospital, and, well, she died soon after.
Gosh, what a sad, sad story. But Richard, tell me more about your love life.
Well, I once had this girlfriend, and, when we broke up, she wandered off with my Albert Einstein medal. And then one of my other girlfriends told her that she ought to fake a pregnancy. And then when she did so, she blackmailed me into paying for her abortion. And then she used all the money I gave her to buy furniture.
Wow. Feynman, we've heard a lot about your love life, but tell me more.
Well, when I was working at Cornell, I did have some good times with a few of the undergraduates. And a couple of prostitutes. And yes, the spouses of a few of my closest friends.
Physics is not the most important thing. Love is.
So, Richard Feynman, besides physics, which is obviously one of your hobbies, could you tell me what else you do in your free time?
I play the bongos.
Physics. Physics.
Snapchat Peter and tell my
Physics.
hi.
Physics. Physics.
Go!
Physics. Okay, that's good.